Why do we keep bringing back Eve Harow? I mean, she's a nice person. She's an Israeli. She's a lot of fun. She has a lot of information. And we only brought, as I said, 2 Israelis to speak this year. She is an activist, but she's kind of an activist who does the activism. She's been in Israel, where she made Aliyah since 1988. It's not just an idea to her, it's her life. She lives in Judea. It almost came out the West Bank. That's how, brainwashed we all are to say West Bank. We're talking about Judea and Samaria, which she will talk far more about. And she was there in Gaza when we had to move all the Jewish communities out of Gaza. She has been, because of her love of the land, she's been an incredible tourist guide. The brightest Israelis are tourist guides. You have to really apply for that, and they only pick the good ones because they present Israel to people coming to visit. And when she guided Judy and I and our friends, 4 of which who are here, when we happened to be in Israel for a jazz program through Jazz Aspen, she guided us around, and the people she guided were just blown away by her intelligence, her education, and all the information that she had. She is tough, and you have to be tough to live where she lives. And when we first used Eve, after she spoke here, my wife and I, she took us to Shiloh. How many people know about Shiloh? Shiloh is where the first tabernacle was, before Jerusalem. I didn't know that. She pointed out to us in the Bible where it states that. And it just brought you so much closer to the land. And while we were traveling to go to Shiloh in the same area in Judea and Samaria, we had lunch at a gas station. Gas station? Well, behind the gas station was a hummus restaurant where they actually make their own hummus in front of you. So you're eating warm, fresh hummus that's out of this world. That's the kind of stuff and places that Eve would take us. And we left, and 3 weeks later, there was a terrorist attack there, and 4 people were killed in that restaurant. There's so much that I could say about Eve and her education. She's got a master's in psychology from Pepperdine, which is in Malibu. It's a fancy place, but it's a great school. And a master's in Land of Israel Studies and Archaeology from Bar-Ilan University. She received the Ambassador Yechiel Leiter Founders Award from One Israel Fund for her years as Director of Tourism and Education there. I could go on talking, as many of you know, about who Eve is and what she does. Please welcome back Eve Harow.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So the most important thing that I've done is raise 7 children, and at the moment, 17 grandchildren. And one of those grandchildren actually got married last Monday. So my new grandson-in-law is serving in Gaza, and one of my sons is on his 10th round of reserve duty right now in the Golan Heights. And another granddaughter is starting national service, and another grandson is starting to prepare for his army service and doing all kinds of tests. So to say that all my skin is in this game is not an exaggeration. The most important thing that I think is for people to come. So not enough hands went up when Alan said, who's been to Shiloh? So if I come back next year, I would really like to see more hands, because the first question you're going to say to me, it's not safe. And Alan just said, like, there was a terror attack. So A, no fear. The enemy counts on us being scared. They keep us from doing the things that we want to do because there's threats out there. We can't live our lives like that. We just can't. And I happen to feel safer in Israel than I do almost anywhere else. I really do. It's a crazy country. It's a country of people who, if you're in trouble, will be there in 2 seconds, even if they've just had a massive argument with you 5 minutes before. Spouse is not included, of course, in this generalization. And those of you who have been here, like Caleb, who lived there for a very long time, and Ian and Heather, who I also want to thank in addition to Alan and Judy for making it possible for me to come here, know that there is nothing like going there and then understanding the lies that you have been fed. Israel's not a white colonialist country. Most Jews in Israel are Jews of color because they were thrown out of the Middle East in the 1950s, which is why you're not really hearing very much about Egyptian Jews and Libyan Jews and Syrian Jews with all the chaos in those countries, because they got thrown out a long time ago and brought into Israel. So Israel is a chaotic place. It's not for the faint-hearted, that is for sure. But there is something so intense and so vibrant, in addition to the phenomenal food, that if you haven't been, is anyone here not been to Israel at all? Okay, so it's time. You need to do it, first of all, you need to do it for your soul. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about for the piece in you that needs to understand what it looks like when people are faced with an evil that we can't even imagine, and how we manage to not just survive, but thrive. A country that gets up every morning, invents things that you, like, I don't think there's any one of you who isn't using things, I'm not even talking about ways, that weren't invented in Israel, okay? Because that's what we do. Because it just so happens that God brought his people home at a time when what we need is creative and smart people to change the world and to change the way we live. And that's what we do. We don't get up in the morning. And it's tough. I'm not going to say the last 3 years, even this wedding last week, we didn't even know if we were going to have it because missiles, Iran, Trump said this, Trump said that, the Straits of Hormuz. It's like every day, what's going on? And you learn to just, either you're going to have, a stroke, or you're just going to learn to say, I can't control this, so I'm not going to let it control me. And it's a group of people that you need to see and you need to understand that you're a part of. This is not like some foreign thing, whether you're Jewish or not. Your faith in humanity will be strengthened if you come to Israel. And I can speak about it on and on and on. My favorite thing to do is just take people around. Now, we have a very big PR problem in Israel in general, and in Judea and Samaria in particular. Can we put up the slide? Okay, so can we put up the other one first, maybe? Or are they both up and I'm just not seeing it? Oh, they're both up. I'm just not seeing it. Here you go. Okay, so that is all of Israel, about the size of New Jersey. Okay, why the obsession about this little country is a whole other conversation for someone who's done 3 fellowships in psychology and then some. But you see where Judea and Samaria is? It's like smack in the middle. It's not like some faraway place. And of course, this is an area that Israel liberated in the 1967 war, but didn't put Israeli law on, didn't annex, like they did with the Golan Heights. And you can see in the close-up, the different districts that we have. 500,000 Jews live in Judea and Samaria, the so-called settlers, and another about 300,000 live in the eastern part of Jerusalem. What that means is that 10% of Israeli Jews live in these areas. It's not just a few people who are sitting on some hilltop. It is a serious number of people, beautiful communities, farming communities, cities, a university. Something like 40% of our current soldiers are either from Judea and Samaria or were educated in Judea and Samaria. So the education and the values that we put into the kids there is that this is not just about you. You have to do something for this country, not because it's perfect, because it's not perfect. Because there's a lot of things that have to be done and you have to get involved. And if everybody does whatever they can do, then it becomes a better place. And it's very, very not simple. Not just the soldiers who are constantly going to Lebanon and into Gaza, but their wives. Okay, so my son is in the Golan Heights. That means that my daughter-in-law is home with 3 kids, again, by herself, with everything that entails. So there is a lot happening here. But when you look how close it is to the centers of Tel Aviv and the other centers, the coastal part. Most of you have been to Israel, you've gone to Tel Aviv, you've gone to Masada, you've gone to Caesarea, to Zichron. But if you turn around and you look at the mountain range, because this is not a topographical map, but Judea and Samaria is the mountain range, and that means it overlooks all of Little Israel. And even with all the security and cameras and everything else, the heights still matter. So you go up into Samaria, you go up into Gush Etzion where I live, you stand on the ridge of the mountains, and you can look down, and without binoculars or anything fancy, you can see Tel Aviv. Now, on October 7th, the Western Negev was what was attacked. Okay, you see where Gaza is? So outside there. And as you all know what happened there and how horrific that was. And there's one man in particular from Kibbutz Be'eri who I've gotten to know, Aviad Bachar, whose wife and son were killed, and he lost one of his legs in the attack. And he has said, he was staunchly left-wing kibbutznik, and he said, if that attack had happened in Gush Etzion or in one of the areas in Judea and Samaria, I would have said, well, what do you want? They're living there, they're provoking the Arabs. That's what you get. But he said it happened here, where all of us were like peaceniks and we believed in coexistence. He said, I'm glad that it did, because we have to understand that this is not just aimed against the Jews of Judea and Samaria. When the college kids on campus are saying from the river to the sea, look at the map. The sea is the Mediterranean on the left side, and the river is the Jordan on the right side. That's not just Judea and Samaria, that's all of Israel. What they're talking about is eradicating the democratic, modern Jewish state of Israel. And you see this happening everywhere, and that Israel's committing genocide, which of course it isn't. I don't know, I'm saying of course it isn't. I hope you all know that. If we wanted to, we could have done that 60 years ago. Israel has no interest in doing that whatsoever. We want everybody to be happy, to raise their kids, to live in peace, to get a good education. But when we are attacked and our lives are threatened, we are going to do what every human being must do, which is defend ourselves and our families. And we don't like doing it, and we're not happy about it. But we also understand that the role that we're playing very far from you is affecting you. That when they're done with the Saturday people, they're coming after the Sunday people. That Israel is the little Satan, but you guys are the great Satan. So when people ask me what I'm thinking and if I'm worried, I'm actually more worried about America right now than I am about Israel. Because I don't think enough people here understand how this is going to affect you. And that supporting Israel is not just doing us a favor because of Judeo-Christian values and it's the only democracy in the Middle East and all that. No, we're the forward line for the United States. And that the cooperation between Israel and the United States and the armies and everything that's going on with Iran is so critical. So you listen to the news now, and there's a lot of chatter about Judea and Samaria and violence, and settler violence. Okay, that's all over the place. And I don't want to get into that because there's an excellent, excellent article that was written by Jonathan Tobin, who was here just a couple of weeks ago. And if you haven't seen it, I'm sure Alan will send it to you, where he goes into all of that, okay? A Jew walking on the Temple Mount is considered settler violence. A Jew defending themselves from attack is considered settler violence. Okay, so there is absolutely no context in what you are reading. And the news media is counting on your ignorance. And you can't let them have that satisfaction. There's too many people who are like, oh God, a plague on both their houses. I mean, who can figure out what's happening in the Middle East? And we understand that Israel has to defend itself. After all, the pogrom of October 7th was really just so terrible. Didn't it go like a little bit overboard? And what's with the prime minister and with all these this violence? And absolutely, again, no context. And I'm not going to sit here and defend everything that Israel does. If you have complaints about Israel, I can match them and then double it, all right? Because there are always things that we can do better. But there's never any comparison as to what's going on around us. Do you know that in North Africa and in so many parts of the Middle East, the Christians who are still left there there's an October 7th virtually every day? Why is nobody saying anything? Why is all this obsession with Israel and a lot of hypocrisy about what is happening and not understanding? So there are a few people in Judea and Samaria who have taken the law into their own hands, and they are being dealt with, and if they have to, they're going on trial, or there being schools opened for them to get them to understand what the proper behavior is and isn't, because we have our teenagers, just like everybody else has their teenagers, who don't always want to listen to authority, who are upset, who are scared, who understand that the Arabs in Judea and Samaria would perpetrate an October 7th on the Jewish communities there in a minute. We know that. We know that, and we're having to work very hard on that, and that they would come into Israel. And that is their plan. I'm not like being a fearmonger. We know this for a fact. And we have to, obviously, to prevent that. So one of the interesting things that's gone on in the last few years are the farms. There's a lot of empty land in Judea and Samaria. If you come there, you realize most of the place is wide open. So what's happened is that the Arabs who live there are moving from place to place, building houses that no one is living in. You drive around and see a lot of empty houses, coming with their sheep, very biblically, and coming to claim the land, coming closer to the communities. Now, when you hear that Jews trespassed on Arab land, understand that they consider all of this Arab land. So that just means that a Jew was walking around somewhere and that's suddenly trespassing on Arab land. You're never told that. Okay, you somehow think, oh, they went into the village. Sometimes they're miles out of the village and they were just taking a hike. So again, that's the context. But what's happened in the last few years that has made a tremendous difference is that the Jews have gone out and started farms. Like this granddaughter of mine who just got married, this is possibly the first time in my life and possibly the only time that I will buy a sheep for a wedding present, okay? Because when her husband finishes the army, he's got about 6 months left, they want to go and live on a farm. And I look at this child and I think to myself, like, okay, I can probably, some people would say take blame for her, but I'm tremendously proud of her because this is the next step. This is really the pioneers. Just like his grandfather, his grandfather started a kibbutz many, many, many years ago. And those were the pioneers and those were the people who were going out when everybody said, what are you out of your mind? What are you doing? It was before the state. And they managed to change the country and establish the country. This is what this next generation is doing. And they're understanding that if they're not on that little hilltop with their sheep, sometimes it's cattle, then the Arabs will be. And their intentions are nefarious, okay? The Jewish kids, they just want to have a farm, and they just want to make sure that nobody's getting close to anything that they shouldn't get near. And it's specifically those farms that are now being accused of being violent and of going out and hurting other people. So wherever you see the attention focused, you know that that's the important thing that we're doing, that's bothering them. Those farms now have controlled 18% of Judea and Samaria are controlled by a few hundred people who are brave, who are going out there. And it's not simple. Sometimes they don't have running water. They have like a little stove. But they understand that this is really a battle from hilltop to hilltop. And so I just wanted, I had asked Ellery this year to put up a map because, sometimes I get a call, someone says, hey, we're coming to Israel, we want you to guide us. We want a day in Judea and Samaria. And I said, look at the map, there's no day in Judea and Samaria. First of all, pick. Judea is south of Jerusalem, Samaria is north of Jerusalem. You're not doing that in one day. And even within these areas, you're not doing it in one day. There's a lot to see. And this is the biblical heartland. This is where the stories happen. 80% of the stories in the Bible that we're so familiar with happen here, not in Tel Aviv and not in other places. There's a book that was just put out by Tuvi Tenenbaum. I don't know if any of you have ever read him. He's a very interesting guy. And he just spent a year in Judea and Samaria. Every 2 weeks he moved to a different community. And he just wrote a book about it. And I think he was intending at the beginning to be critical, to see what was going on. He ended up writing a book. I'm in the book, which is why I'm reading it right now, because I have a podcast every week and I want to interview him next week, about how he wasn't prepared for how beautiful it was, for how he felt when he walked on those hills. He just felt something very ancient, and he felt like he belonged. And how the kids that are raised there, they're like an apple in an apple orchard. They're home. So I find it difficult to keep shoes on some of my grandchildren because they just run around barefoot. They're they don't even understand what the discussion is about if the Jews are indigenous to the land. Because it's not Judaism, it's Judeanism. For those of you who know Hebrew, Judea in Hebrew is Yehudah. Jews in Hebrew are Yehudim. Before we became a religion and the ability to practice our religion, even very far from home, this was a nation, and this was what we did in Judea. So there's no argument to be made here. The rhythm of the Jewish holidays is the rhythm of the harvests in Israel. It's just so obvious. The prayers that we say for rain or not for rain is the weather pattern there. So when you're there, you feel it in a completely different way. And it's been the privilege of my life to be able not just to live there and to raise my family there, but to be able at least to try to explain to people what is really happening here. Because it affects all of you. This isn't just some little story of something. This is so much bigger. It's such a little place, and we just want to be left alone. But whoever comes after the Jews ends up coming after everybody who's good. We've seen this movie before, folks, not all that long ago. So caring for Israel, criticizing Israel because we can take it and because we deserve it, but keep it within proportions and understanding of what's really happening there. Don't fall into the lies. Don't fall into what the press is trying to get you to believe or find out. You're welcome to write to me, okay, or anybody that I can give you a list of people to write to and say, hey, this just came out. What really happened here? And I will answer you, all right? Because you're not getting that. You're not getting that context. You have to dig for it. There are ways of finding it, but it's not simple. And you have to ask yourself, which is again is a completely different discussion, why? What happened here? Since October 7th, you would think that every normal, decent human being on the planet would understand what Israel is up against. Yet we see the support for Israel falling among young people, and the keffiyah has suddenly become a fashion statement. Something is seriously wrong. And you need to make sure that you understand that. So, Alan, did you want to ask me questions or have?
Where are you on the map? Just everybody knows. Right on the map. Where you live.
Right on the map. Okay, so where I live is, let's see, I'll go over here. Okay, you see Jerusalem, right? There's the northern part and then it tucks in, okay? And there's Jerusalem, and I live in Efrat. You see where it says Gush Etzion? Yeah. Efrat is right above it. So that's where I live, okay? My backyard overlooks Bethlehem, and in the distance, this over here is Jordan. okay? Or biblically speaking, the hills of Moab. So on the eve of Shavuot, the holiday with the book of Ruth, I actually just set up my camera in my backyard and I gave a lesson about the book of Ruth to a group of Christian Zionists who were watching on Zoom. I didn't even have to move the camera, and I gave them the entire book of Ruth, because she comes from Moab and she goes to Bethlehem, and the whole story just takes place there. And it was amazing. I realized, I live this every single day. I get to live this, but I have a responsibility to them to make sure that this story doesn't end. It can't end, not for the sake of, let alone the Jews, but for the sake of the good people in the world, many good people. This is much bigger than we are. So that's what I try and do, and I invite you all to join it, at least to understand what's happening and be able to share that with others.
Come have a seat, get comfy. You briefly mentioned how happy people are in Israel. As I understand, it's the 4th happiest place in the world.
I think 11th, but it's after Finland and Norway and Sweden, where not much goes on to make them unhappy, except that they don't have sunshine for a good part of the winter. But aside from that, it kind of came in. It's commensurate with how good our wine is. Maybe there is a connection between how happy we are and how good the wine is now. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility.
There was a story going around that the Prime Minister should fire the head of the genocide department in Israel.
For doing a bad job.
For doing a lousy job. Tell us about the growth in the population at Gaza and the Arab population, citizens of Israel.
Look, if you drive around Judea and Samaria, we have aerial photos from before 1967 when Jordan occupied the area. And there are a few scattered villages here and there that King Hussein didn't care about at all. And when Israel takes over in 67, suddenly they have a population boom. We have roads, we have better infrastructure. You see their mansions, you see their beautiful cars. They actually have a beautiful life. Now Gaza is a different story, because you mentioned that I moved there in the summer of 2005. I had a lot of friends who lived there. We used to vacation there all the time. And when I call it the expulsion from Gaza was coming in 2005, I actually moved down there with my kids. We were hoping that we could prevent it. Obviously, we didn't. It was a very difficult time, but I can tell you that October 7th didn't surprise many of us. The scale of it and the cruelty did, but the fact that it was going to happen and that Gaza was going to turn into a base for terror was very, very obvious. What we need to understand, and I'm saying we, because the Western mindset doesn't go to this place, there's always a place for compromise. Everybody wants the same thing. We want our kids to be healthy and happy and move along, and we'll find a middle ground. The jihadist mentality is not that. This is a religious war for them. They have a lot of patience. They are willing and eager to sacrifice their children for what they think should come. And there's nothing that you can do with an enemy like that except stop them from what they want to do. And that is one of the most depressing things. But when you go into Gaza, which unless you're in uniform, people don't go into Gaza now, and you see the extent of the tunnel infrastructure that they built and the tremendous money that they put into killing people and taking people hostage and not caring about their own people, then it's frightening. It's frightening that some of the hostages were staying in the homes of doctors. Now in the last year, now that thank God, all the hostages, the living hostages, came home, little by little, some of what they went through is coming out. We'll never hear all their stories, and we shouldn't, because we also want to protect them. And the things that were done to them, people shouldn't necessarily hear. They need to be able to heal and move on. But just from the little bit that we've learned, the ostensible good people there, the teachers, and like I said, the doctors, were completely complicit in what happened there, and the children no less. So that is still very much a battleground, and what happens there needs to be done in a very smart way. Because if Israel is forced to leave Gaza and forced to leave Lebanon, all these terror groups will just take root again, and in another couple of years or less, we'll even have the same. And so we have to be allowed to just finish this and make sure that they can't do what they want to do. And not just for us, but for their own people. You know that there are villages in southern Lebanon that have asked to be annexed to Israel. Christian villages that have said, please make us a part of Israel. We don't want to live like this anymore. And unfortunately, you're not hearing a lot of stories, because if there's a Muslim who prefers Israel and they say it out loud, you're going to go to their funeral tomorrow, flat out. So a lot of the truth you're not hearing. And I have conversations with people all the time about this because they trust me. Because even though I'm the settler, because they know that I don't mean them any harm, I want them to just have a good life. I have one caveat: don't kill my family. And so they will tell me things. And like there's a national park called Harow, not far from where I live, a phenomenal site. That's where King Harow was buried, and I call it the Trump Tower of the ancient world, for a lot of different reasons. But anyway, there's a young woman who works there, an Arab woman from East Jerusalem, beautiful young woman. And there's a film, and I send my tourists in to see the film, and then I sit outside and talk to her. And she's always happy to see me, and she gives me a hug. She's really lovely. And one day she completely broke down, and she said, I'm never going to get married. And I said, what do you mean you're never going to get married? She said, well, my sister married a Muslim and he beats her. And so my other sister married a Christian, but my parents are furious with her for marrying out of the faith. And so I'm just never going to get married because I don't want to be beaten. She said, don't people realize that Muslim men are the most violent group on the planet? And this is coming from her. So now I weep for her because I want her to be married, to be respected, to have children. And her own society, having nothing to do with me, is not going to allow her to do that. So we can stand by and we can help. And there's a story that I said to some people. The head of security in Gush Etzion, where I live, was called to an incident. There was a 14-year-old Arab girl who tried to stab somebody. He managed to stop her, and they brought her in, and he said to her, what are you doing? And she said, well, my family is accusing me of a moral lapse. I think she was seen with a boy. And she said, so in order to expunge that and to bring honor back to my family, I had to go and try and kill a Jew. And then if I was killed, then I was a martyr, and then my family's honor is cleansed. This sounds so insane to all of us, but this is actually what happens every single day. So she said, please don't send me back because I failed in my mission and they'll kill me. So he tried, the security chief, English Etzion, tried to get her like asylum in Israel and couldn't. I mean, there's no way of doing that. She's not an Israeli. Israeli Arabs have all the protection of Israel, but she doesn't. And so he told me with a broken heart he had to send her back. Now, 2 hours before, she had tried to kill a Jew, and here he is feeling terrible for her. So this is where we live. This is how we are, where we want to stay compassionate and we want to keep caring because that's who we are. But on the other hand, we can't allow that compassion to be seen as weakness and for us to be hurt for it. It's a virtually impossible situation, and what you're hearing is only one part of it. You might have heard, if that even came on the news, Israel, arrests a 14-year-old girl. That's probably how it would have been played, without any of the story behind it. And this happens over and over and over again, so that even if you care about Israel, you start getting worn down. Start saying, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. And what is up with the Israelis? Don't they understand? Don't they have better PR? Don't they everything? And again, I'm not saying that we don't make many, many, many mistakes. We do a lot of things right. And I think that isn't made enough of. I don't know if there's any country that would, given the pressures that we're under and everything that we're facing, would be able to act the way we act. Just come to Israel, come to Israel and go to the hospital. I mean, don't get sick. Just walk into the emergency room and you'll just see everybody sitting there, all being treated the same way. The Jewish patient being treated by the Arab doctor, and the Bedouin treating the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox person. That's the way it should be. But that's not the way that you're hearing it. And it's more than distressing, to say the least.
Well, take a drink.
This is wrong, right?
Speaking of Haredi, that's another part that we hear just a bit of, and it becomes a political situation with fellow Jews who say those awful ultra-religious Haredi people, they don't serve in the army, all they do is sit in a yeshiva, which most people don't say because they don't know what a yeshiva is, and they study and they do nothing for the country. Let's talk about Haredi in the IDF, and let's talk about, please, the other group who doesn't serve in the IDF. Take it.
Okay, so when it comes to the ultra-Orthodox, this is a sensitive point for me because, as I said, my family is very much involved in serving the country, and they have to be. That they were all raised like that. You have to be a part of what's happening here. It's not if you're doing it, is what exactly you're going to do. But there's a sector of Israeli society, the ultra-Orthodox, that is not really participating in the army. There are a few different reasons for it. Some of it is that they don't feel connected to the state, and that has to be changed, that they understand that they also have to participate in doing things for the state. And that is already on the political echelon, whether it's changing budgets or whatever. There are, though, moves to integrate them into the army, and there are units, for example, because they are very conservative, small c, they don't really want their 18-year-old son sitting in a tank for 4 days with a beautiful Israeli girl soldier. Now, I understand that. That flies in the face of, they don't want the kids to have premarital sex, and they're, like I said, conservative. I can totally understand. So the army has to learn also to accommodate them and make sure that there are separate, because we have a lot of female soldiers, that there are separate bases and that maybe the food is a higher standard of kashrut for them, whatever it is. So it's not just that the ultra-Orthodox aren't serving. The army also hasn't made it amenable for them to come. So it's coming from both sides. There are changes being made, and it will take some time. But it's a very rough issue for me because, I have cousins who are very ultra-Orthodox, and quite honestly, it's hard for me to talk to them sometimes because they're not dealing with the reality that I'm dealing with. At my granddaughter's wedding last week, a good number of her husband's friends couldn't come because they couldn't get out of Gaza in order to come to the wedding. Or whoever was there had an M16 slung over his shoulder. Have you ever seen people dancing with an M16? It's a tough dance.
So there are already in the IDF.
There are, but it needs to be more. And it needs to be more accepted in their sector. Okay, that somebody coming home in a uniform is not considered, someone who betrayed Torah values. So the world that I live in, there is a pasuk, there's more than one verse in the Torah that says that you need to fight if there's a war. It's not against the Torah, it's actually in the Torah. So I don't see that it's one or the other, that you're a religious Jew or you serve in the army. There are quite a few men in uniform who, if you take a look at them on the break, they're studying Gemara, or they have it in their bag, or they're making Shabbat out in the middle of absolutely nowhere because that's where the base is, or they're wrapping tefillin at 5 a.m. after they've been up all night doing some ambush. And that to me is really the ultimate. And the paradigm, of course, for that is none other than King David, who was a warrior, but also a deep believer, and had a relationship with God that, for many of us, Christians and Jews, sets the tone for us, even 3,000 years after he lived. And so Israel is in flux. There's a lot of different forces within Israel, even leaving aside our outside enemies.
How about
But
the
having
other
said
group?
that, there are 20% of Israelis who are Arabs who also don't serve in the IDF, and nobody ever talks about them. But they have all the privileges of being Israelis, and I think that they should also, I understand the army part, but they should do something. Then do national service, work in a hospital, work in a kindergarten, pave a road, I don't care, drive an ambulance, but something, because it will also connect them more to the country, and also we need them. We need them. This is not a free ride. The country needs everybody. We are
They're
less than 10 million.
citizens. They're citizens.
They're citizens of Israel. I'm not talking about the Arabs that live in Judea and Samaria. I'm talking about citizens of Israel. Generational citizens who go to university and should and get all the privileges of being an Israeli, which is great, the medical care, the education. But I think unless obviously someone has some kind of health issue or something like that, and of course that happens, I think it would behoove them. And there is a move to do that as well. So there's a lot of things. We've got elections coming up at the end of October. Once again, it will be very interesting to see what happens. But there are a lot of different changes that have to be made. But for example, on the Golan Heights is on this map? Yes, at the very top on the right. So there's a group of people that live on the Golan Heights called the Druze. The Druze are not Muslims. It's a religion that started about 1,000 years ago. Very interesting religion. They believe in reincarnation. They're very, very cheap, but they're very tough. They don't want their own country. There are Jews all over the Middle East. They're very loyal to whoever gives them a safe place. There are Israeli Jews who live in Haifa. Some of our best soldiers and some of really people in high tech, terrific teachers are Druze. But the Jews on the Golan Heights didn't accept Israeli citizenship because for a long time they were worried that Israel was going to give the Golan Heights to Syria. And you don't really want to show up in Syria with an Israeli ID card. But now that Syria essentially has completely fallen apart, hopefully, many of them have now taken Israeli citizenship. I was just up there last month with a group. We went to Majd al-Shams. Majd al-Shams is a Jews village all the way in the top corner of Israel, where Hezbollah shot a rocket intentionally last year, exactly a year ago, and it hit a soccer field and killed 12 of their children. So I was there and we met with some of the families who had lost their children. And they are now, many of the Druze on the Golan Heights have now gladly taken Israeli citizenship and want to feel a part of Israel. They feel protected by Israel. They feel more cared for by Israel than of any of the countries around us. And the Druze tend to be a bellwether of what's happening. They're a very, very interesting group. And so that's kind of a sign of what's happening as well. I mean, unfortunately, it happened because they were attacked by Hezbollah and they understood that. And the people who came to help, of course, were Jewish Israelis. And so it was a very painful wake-up call for them about who was really on their side and who wasn't. That's them.
The Jews of the Canary and the Coal Mine. And Ken Levin has just published a book called Canary on the Couch. He's a psychiatrist, and he's talking about Jews who don't get all of this, and how it's really a remarkable book. I started reading it.
So I interviewed him a few months ago when the book came out, and he said that there are 4 forces that have all allied against us who hate each other and have nothing to do with each other. The Red-Green Alliance, right? So you have the very progressives, you have the jihadists, you have the Marxists, and you have, what's the other group? Oh, and you have your usual neo-Nazi fascists. And all of them together have really come out now against Jews around the world, and particularly against Israel. And a lot of Jews are just not paying attention or trying to be liked by them. I'm here for 2 weeks. I just got in from Israel yesterday, and I'm in the States for 2 weeks. And I'm speaking here, and I'm speaking in 2 synagogues over the 2 Shabbatot that I'm here, and I'm going to speak to Christian Zionists, and I'm even have meetings with Muslim leaders in the United States, because there's a lot of interfaith work that is going on now, a lot of people who do not like what is happening and are trying to find the commonalities. The one group that when I reached out to them to speak, that didn't want me to speak, was a Reform synagogue in New York City. Okay, even though my friend who goes there, and he said, first of all, like, she's a woman, aren't you into women coming to speak? I still identify as a woman. And aren't you progressive and open-minded and want to hear from all sides? And they don't. Okay, and this is an opportunity to have some give and take, to have them ask me hard questions, and I can answer, and they flatly refuse to have me come there. So it's distressing because we need all hands on deck, but it's their loss, and I feel bad because there are a lot of very good people around the world who get it. Excuse me?
One.
Yeah, because I live in Judea and Samaria, so I'm the problem. So that's what he told me, that they didn't want me to speak there because, I'm an enemy to the Jewish people. If it wasn't for me, everybody would like Jews. If it wasn't for those of us who have said that Jews belong in Judea, then Mamdani probably wouldn't be the mayor of New York City. So, okay.
Speaking
Don't waste
of
my time arguing
hypocrisy,
that anymore.
we have Spain. Of course, Spain is openly Jew-hating at this point through its government, who says, what are you doing with not allowing people in your country? Guess what happened?
Oh my goodness, what
A
happened?
place called Ceuta, which is this teeny little pimple on the north of Morocco. And why don't you go ahead?
Well, I think it's considered like Spanish sovereign territory, so that anybody who goes there can apply for asylum or to go into Spain. So they just got overwhelmed. What was it, 50,000? 70? Like, okay, 70,000. So I really wish I could feel badly for Spain. If I didn't know so much about the Inquisition, my heart might be more with them. Europe in general doesn't understand that this is a religious war. The Christians and Muslims fought each other for centuries, and now Christian Europe let the enemy in the front door, and they will pay dearly for that. And I don't want that to happen here. I don't want that to happen here. But to see, I don't know if any of you go to London or to Paris or to Belgium or any of these places, and it's not what it was. It's just not what it was. I mean, when the most popular name in London for a new child is Mohammed and not Jack. Wow. So, you talk about us being happy, and I mentioned the wine. But Israel has the highest birth rate in the Western world. I mean, the Jewish women are having 3 and, I have 7, but, because we are happy, which you mentioned. And why are we happy? Because it doesn't seem to make any sense that we're happy. We're happy because we have strong family and community bonds, because we have a meaning to our life. We understand that there's a bigger picture here. And that goes a long, long way. And I just went to a fascinating lecture a couple weeks ago that talked about the difference between, it was in Hebrew, between choseh and brit. A choseh is a contract. It's like a business arrangement. I buy something from you, you give it to me, the money, whatever, we're done. A brit is a covenant. And the intention of a brit is to change both sides. It's something much bigger than just an agreement between the two. And Israelis are bound together by a brit. I'm not talking about the bris and the brit milah. I'm not talking about circumcision. I'm talking about something much, much bigger. About an understanding that our whole is so much greater than the sum of our parts. And there is so much here that is intense and beautiful and can't be put into words. Because when you live life not just for yourself, but for the others around you, and for the past and for the future, it's a completely different life. And it doesn't make it an easy life, but it makes it a very meaningful and deep life. And that is what I really have the joy of experiencing in Israel and being a part of. And hopefully watching many grandchildren get married and establish their families. They don't all have to live on a farm. I'm fine if somebody wants to live in Tel Aviv and I can just buy them like a mixer instead of a sheep. That's also good. But whatever it is that they choose to do, they know that they are representing so much more than just their lives. That there's a real tie to a whole lot of people whom they don't even know. I have said for years that if I'm in trouble, if a building falls on me or whatever, if I hear Hebrew, I know I'll be okay. Because I know that the people who speak Hebrew are people who, there are no boundaries when it comes to helping, not just us, anybody, okay? I mean, there were Israelis in Venezuela, when they had the massive earthquake there. The crack team went there to find people, because that's just who we are. We need to be very, very proud of that. And we need to always try to be better, but also be able to stand up and say, hey, whoa with the criticism and whoa with the hatred, like enough, okay? Because this has gone completely, completely out of control. So I'm very proud to be a Judean, and I invite you all to come and understand maybe just a glimmer of why it is that I don't just have faith in God, but I have faith in my people and in my land. And that I know that we will have a wonderful future. It's got a few bumps in the road that we got to deal with on the way.
Obviously, from what she has said today, has major concern for our country and where it's going. And before we take questions, which we'll do in a minute, I just want to make sure you're aware of AIPAC. AIPAC can't get political, which is why they formed AIPAC-PAC. And AIPAC-PAC has been successful in last election and in this election in keeping people like Cori Bush and people like that out of coming back into Congress, as they did yesterday. So everybody asked me, well, what can we do? Where can we put money to help stem this tide of this Red-Green Alliance? And AIPAC-PAC is one of those that we should help and give to, because remember, El Sayed won this election last night, but he's still got to face Michigan, not just a party preliminary vote. He's got to face Michigan. Remember, the Republicans won Michigan in the last election. So we need to help make sure that just an incredible Jew hater like this does not get into the Senate. So I'm sorry about being political, but we've got to act on it. Now, let's take questions from the audience.
Birthright has been hugely successful. I understand that there is a movement to have Birthright extended to older Jews that have never been to Israel. Is that a strong possibility, and is there a true movement towards that?
I would hope so. My son works for a VC firm in Tel Aviv, although he now is also he has a back injury from his Army service, so he can't be combat, but he's now taking 1 day a week to work with the IDF spokesperson's office, because he's very articulate, and to try and hone their messaging. So, but he brought home, he's married with kids, but he came to me for Shabbat a couple weeks ago with 3 interns, 3 kids who were on a Birthright program, like young college guys, really bright, from Stanford and other places, who were brought to Israel by Birthright for the summer to get them to know Israel, not to get them to move to Israel, but to get them to connect with professionals in Israel, and then be able to go home to whatever it is they live and have a connection in Israel. It was a phenomenal program. However, I will say, I live in Efrat. So when they contacted the Birthright office and they said, we want to spend Shabbat in Efrat, they were told no, because Birthright doesn't go into Judea and Samaria, which I think is a very big problem, because how do you get them to understand the situation if you don't even bring them in? And insurance and security, all of that can be dealt with. Okay, I've taken people around if they were really nervous, and there's no reason to be nervous, on a bulletproof bus if you have to. That's not a reason to not go into these places. In the end, we got permission, and they came to my house, and we had an amazing time. Fascinating kids, each one with one Jewish parent and one not, so they have their interesting stories and their different backgrounds. And we just had a beautiful Shabbat. So they do wonderful things. I would like them to expand that a little bit and not be afraid to let the kids come in. Some of them may say, what the heck are we doing here? And others may say, oh my goodness, how could anybody think that in any way or form we should leave? But they're intelligent enough to make their own opinion if they're exposed to it. So I think it's a great way of coming to Israel. I would just like to see them go now to the next step. Even though they were telling me how amazing Tel Aviv is and how beautiful the girls were. So that was a different conversation.
By the way, I have a funny feeling that some people sitting here and a lot of people outside still think that a community like Efrat is mobile homes and settlers, okay? This could be the farthest from the truth. These are magnificent communities that have been built.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Aspen, but nothing's Aspen. But no, we have normal homes and backyards and supermarkets. Look, Judea and Samaria is framed according to how people want to put it down. So if you want to say that we're just temporary and we are just trying to annoy everybody, we're all sitting in tents and in caravans. And if you want to say that we've taken all the money in the state coffers and there's nothing left for anybody else, then suddenly we're all living in mansions. And somewhere in the middle, we have normal bedroom communities. We have a university. There's a wine and vine research center in Ariel University, which has done really a lot of things. But some of the people, Ariel University is there in the middle of the Shomron. Some of the people affiliated with Ariel University, top-notch archaeologists, top-notch scientists, are forbidden from giving their research, presenting their research around the world because of where they teach. So even to come and teach in a place like this, you are harming your professional future. Or like, I'm very into archaeology. The archaeologists that dig in Judea and Samaria are very often, their reports won't be published, and they are told because you're digging in occupied territory. So I can just tell you, because this is really a pet peeve of mine, 40% of Judea and Samaria is not in Israeli control. It was given away by the Oslo Accords to the Palestinian Authority / Hamas. Every single archaeological site in those areas has been destroyed. Okay, we have no access to them, and they are being destroyed there intentionally, because it speaks to a history that the people, the Arabs living there, want erased. So what we are doing, at least in the 60% of Judea and Samaria that we still control, is trying to prevent that. But we have a tremendous problem with theft of the archaeological sites. And like right outside my house in Efrat, there's something called Solomon's Pools. These are, it's as big, one of them is bigger than this room, and there are 3 of them. They were enormous pools that were built by the Hasmoneans 2,100 years ago to bring water to the temple, because we're higher than Jerusalem. There's no pumps, there's no electricity, water flows down. Now, they were given over to the Palestinian Authority in Bethlehem in the Oslo Accords. It was apparently a mistake on the map. So this beautiful Jewish heritage site, and not just Jewish, Pontius Pilate, and we have this in Josephus's book, takes money from the temple treasury in order to repair one of these pools. I mean, it's written, it's a tremendous historical site. So we have now been trying to run tours there. I was just there last week with some people, and I have to go with the army, because just going to visit these pools means that I'm provoking people and forcing them to have to kill my group. This is what we're up against. And that would be my going to Solomon's Pools with a group of people who just want to see one of the most beautiful water catching basins in the entire Roman Empire. If we were killed, it would be framed as, why were we going into a Palestinian area? Why were we provoking them and forcing them to kill us? And this is where the minds go. So that is something, like, that's a small thing that I'm now a part of, because it also can't be that people that just want to visit the site get killed just for like wanting to visit a site. We're not doing any violence. We're not trying to do anything. We want to fix it up. We just want everyone to have access there. But there's this idea that that anything that we do is sever violence, and therefore they feel harmed, and then they have the right to come and kill us. It's crazy. So hopefully we'll get to do that. We now have the army agreeing to come in with us once a week. But I look at these soldiers and I think, first of all, this is totally humiliating. I should not have to go into this place with soldiers. Also, they need to be doing other things. Like, I'm torn, because on the one hand, I want to go there and we have to have protection. On the other hand, they've got other things to do, So that's where I'm sitting. And also, as a mother of soldiers, I look at them and I give them cookies. And I ask, what's your mom's phone number? I want to call her and tell her how wonderful you are and that, you're doing okay today, because I know what she's feeling at home. So they're not just these amorphous people. They're our kids. They're our kids. And having said that, 2 soldiers were killed in Lebanon yesterday. Their names have just been announced. And one of them is from Nukdim, which is just east of Efrat in Gush Etzion. So 2 more families whose lives have been destroyed because you don't recover from that. And it can't be for nothing. It just can't be for nothing. And that's my only hope, is that at least their sacrifices are going to build a better Israel and a better world. And may they rest in peace.
You mentioned the soldiers here, the soldiers there. I'm not sure everybody's aware of who runs this Judea and Samaria. In other words, it's not the Israeli government, it's the army. Could you just briefly explain that?
Briefly. A year-long discussion. Because Judea and Samaria was not annexed in 1967, we live in a big mess. Technically, we are under the purview of the Israeli army. But our laws are a mishmash of Ottoman, British, and Jordanian law in addition to Israeli law. And what that means is if somebody plants some trees and nobody bothers him for 7 years, he can now claim that it's his land. There are squatters' rights under Jordanian law. So now the Arabs do this all the time. When we plant the trees, they're immediately uprooted. When they plant the trees, well, we have nothing against trees, so we leave the trees. And this is also part of to whom does the land belong. But if you come, when you come, you'll see that on the roads, everybody's driving on the roads, Jews, Arabs, nobody's bothering anybody else. If there's a car accident, Magen David Adom shows up. They actually prefer Magen David Adom to the Red Crescent. The Arabs will actually call Magen David Adom instead of the Red Crescent.
Jewish doctor.
A lot of people work for Magen David Adom are also Israeli Arabs. That's one of the beautiful things that have happened in those ambulances, and they all save lives, and there's a lot of coexistence. There's a lot of wonderful things that happen, but you have to get beyond the headlines in order to see them. And that's why Alan keeps bringing me out here to bother you every summer about what you need to do, and to light some fires.
Thanks for always coming here. And also when you wisely speak on CNN. My hope is that you share this with 100 million people on Charlemagne of God or Joe Rogan. You and the dean that spoke of the Hebrew University of the Medical School were so good. You're the best spokesman. So that's for you to think about. But also I want to ask you, with the elections coming up in September, they were saying Bibi was here not just for Iran, but to get Trump's support. Do you see any other viable candidate, given that on Bibi's watch, they had the tunnels and nobody saw where the sand went, and giving the money to Hamas? Is there some coalition that you are hoping for that you think can help bring American Judaism and Judaism all over and the world together?
Told you they'd ask that.
Yeah, well, that's an easy question. Look, a lot of people blame their anti-Israel attitude on the fact that they don't like the prime minister. Okay? Israel is a democracy, and we elect the prime minister. So the elected prime minister means that the majority of Israelis felt that this was the person who was going to get the job done. when it comes to the next elections, and he's running again, I think a lot of Israelis are very torn because on the one hand, he seems to have a good relationship with Trump, which is very important. But as you said, it was October 7th happened on his watch, and all this illegal building.
Listen to the women who were trying to.
So one of my daughters was a spotter. She had that job 15 years ago during her Army service, and she told us that they knew this was going to happen. They weren't listened to. Again, the Prime Minister doesn't get direct communication from the spotters at the border. There's a lot of filters along the way, and I don't know what went on there, and it definitely wasn't good. So we'll see what happens. Most Israelis have moved right, even the kids, that which is unusual. Like most American kids have moved left, but in Israel they've moved right because they've grown up seeing that all the things that Israel did to try and get peace, leaving Sinai, do you remember that? The early 80s to Egypt. So now Sinai has become a bastion of ISIS and all kinds of really not good fun. Leaving Gaza in 2005. Oslo in 1993 saying, okay, we'll give them a good chunk of Judea and Samaria, and then eventually some kind of entity of their own as long as they give up terrorism, which they couldn't do. Lebanon, we were in Lebanon in 2000 and left, and look what we got instead. So this generation has grown up with that. So they don't understand what was wrong with the rest of us and why we didn't just understand human nature. So Israeli kids have moved right. Whether that will be reflected in the elections is another question because it's a very complicated election system. And if you vote for a party that doesn't reach a certain threshold, all those votes are thrown away. And so you could technically have more people voting for right-wing parties, but because they're all fractured and everybody's ego is bigger than Solomon's pools, and all kinds of people have to decide that only they can save Israel. Do I sound annoyed? Yes. Then we may actually, the right may actually not be reflected. So it's going to be interesting. But some people need to calm down and understand that, Jews don't believe the Messiah has come, and that includes them. So just chill and let's just put your ego aside and understand that we have to work together to make this better.
Speaking of Oslo, it is important to point out that that agreement formed a Palestinian police that was supposed to police the cities of the, quote, Palestinians at the time. That police force is now 70,000 men strong army. And that's sitting there in Judea and Samaria. Doesn't this bespeak October 7th?
This was part of what we call the conceptia in Israel, like this concept that many Israelis talked themselves into, that if we just gave them certain things, they would stop hating us. And it turns out that their hating us has absolutely nothing to do, it has to do with our existence, period. And so, yes, so they were armed because they were Fatah and they were going to fight Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And it turns out that they're all the same. And that's why I don't take tourists into Jericho and Bethlehem, even though as an Israeli tour guide, I have permission to do that because my Christian tourists want to go into these places. I've gone in myself, but I don't want to be responsible for my tourists, even if they sign a waiver and all of that, because that's who's there, is the Palestinian police. I do have a picture of myself with one of them in Jericho from a few years ago, but many of them have been implicated in terrorism. So that's what we're up against. Yeah, you're 100% right.
Eve, what do you think is the future of the 20% Israeli Arabs? And I'll preface my question by revealing that I'm a settler in 1982. When we went to Ma'ale Adumim, there was absolute nothing there. Today we have 40,000 inhabitants, and all my children have 24 grandchildren who live there. However, we have many Arabs very well integrated into society, not only Israeli Arabs, but also the Arabs who come from the villages next door. My question is, do you see the Israeli Arabs integrating into the democracy? Right now they're outside, and Naftali Bennett maybe put a little bit inside. How do you view it?
So that's a great question. That's probably the reason why Israel didn't apply Israeli law in Judea and Samaria, is because what do you do with the Arabs there? You don't want to give them Israeli citizenship. So and again, this is a whole long discussion, and you've had Moti Kedar here, and some of the other people have different plans for this. First of all, UNRWA has to be disbanded. Okay, UNRWA is the UN refugee organization that only dealt with the Arabs who were displaced in the period of World War II. Every other refugee, including the Jews, has been settled somewhere else. And it was established, as you know, to keep them. Now, we know what happened with UNRWA in Gaza, and we know exactly how UNRWA is behaving in Judea and Samaria also, which is a very Hamas-oriented education that they're giving the kids, and one day all of the Jews will be gone and all of this will be yours. So I actually think that this has to be done in two stages. The Arabs who are living under UNRWA in Judea and Samaria need to be repatriated somewhere else. If you're a refugee, and for 80 years you've been taking money from the world as a refugee, it's time to not be a refugee anymore and be resettled in a different country. It's not working here for a variety of reasons. There are countries that will take them and they will have a better life. I mean, if they're so miserable, they should want to go, okay? So that's some of them. The other ones, like in Jericho and in Shechem and different places. So Moti Kedar has an idea based basically on the UAE, on the Emirates, because Arab society tends to be very tribal. And they listen to the authority of their chamula, of their tribe. And his idea is to give the tribal authorities within the different cities the jurisdiction, if you will, over their cities, trade agreements with Israel, tourism in and out of Israel, everything but security, because understandably there's a lack of trust here, and then see where that goes. It's done, the UAE is doing very nicely with that kind of plan. So that's his idea. Obviously, there are things that would have to be worked out, but there are ideas out there. It's not give them all Israeli citizenship or throw them all out. There is room in between for people who are thinking a little bit creatively and understand that a Palestinian state under its own devices in Judea and Samaria could possibly destroy Israel. If October 7th was that bad in the Western Negev, and what we found out what Hezbollah was planning in the northern part of Israel, that thank God didn't happen. You know, we found all these weapons and they were going to take over Metula and all these horrible things. If Sinwar hadn't jumped the gun in Gaza, we might have lost Israel in October of 2023. If we'd had thousands of people taken hostage and the northern part of Israel, the high grounds attacked, the scenarios, it could have been much, much worse than it was. So there are people working on it. Is everybody going to be happy? Absolutely not. But are most people hopefully going to have a better life and a better future? That can happen. But you need very brave leadership to stand up and to do that. And that's what I'm hoping happens. I mean, there are people thinking in that direction. But the main thing is, and this is where you all come into play here, if there are people that are saying that this was once Palestine, and therefore Israel took over, basically we're the new Nazis, right? We're doing to them what was done to us in Europe. Why do you think the genocide counter comes up all the time? Okay, we are the Nazis, the people in power, and the Europeans love this argument because it kind of lets them off the hook for World War II. Okay, so they're very into that. We need for people to understand that that's not true, and that we want everybody to have a good life and work towards that. But to create a Palestinian state here, which will be taken over by Hamas, just like Gaza was, is to perhaps, God forbid, really give a death knell to Israel. And that's something that we have to avoid. We don't have to make excuses for not being suicidal. We're always apologizing, and it's enough. One of the things that you see when you go to Israel is that the Israelis have very good posture in the sense of they have confidence. Like, this is not, we don't need to apologize for being here. We have just as much right as any other people in the world to have our own country, and we want to make things good for everybody else. But if you mess with us, we're going to fight back. The day of the helpless Jew is over for good. And that is only because of the state of Israel. We're done. I don't want the history books said any more inquisitions, holocausts, or crusades. We are done. It's not pretty, and it gets bloody, and we don't want it to be like that, but the world has given us no choice. And so the strong Jews are back, and we're back to stay. And that's not going to change. Not on my watch, anyway.
A very appropriate statement to end on. To thank you, Eve, for coming back. I can tell everyone Eve will be back again next year. We guarantee it. Please feel free to come up and talk with her and ask questions. Eve, we cannot thank you enough. God bless you.